The interstellar arena stretched across 3 moons, its crystalline walls pulsing with energy that could contain the fury of dying stars. 60,000 spectators from 47 different worlds filled the floating galleries, their various forms of excitement creating a symphony of sounds that no human ear had ever heard. In the center of this cosmic coliseum, the reigning champion of the Galactic Combat League stood 12 feet tall, his 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws that had torn through the armor of champions from across the galaxy. Zephyr the Destroyer had not lost a match in 7 standard years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But today something was different. The massive alien warrior, whose species had conquered 3 star systems through sheer brutality, was trembling. His yellow eyes, each the size of dinner plates, darted nervously around the arena as if searching for an escape route. The crowd noticed his unusual behavior, and their excitement turned to confused murmurs. Commentators broadcasting to billions of viewers across known space struggled to explain why their most feared gladiator appeared to be experiencing something unprecedented in his career. Fear. The reason for Zephyr's terror was simple, though no one in the audience could have understood it. Somewhere in the fighter preparation chambers beneath the arena, a small human woman was lacing up her tennis shoes and checking her phone for messages from her kid's school. Chen had driven carpool that morning, dropped off soccer cleats at the sports store, and picked up groceries for dinner. Now she was preparing to step into the most dangerous sporting event in Galactic history, and she was running exactly 7 minutes behind schedule because the parking situation at the arena was absolutely terrible. Chen had never intended to become the most feared competitor in galactic combat sports. 3 months ago, she had been living a perfectly ordinary life in the suburbs of New Denver, Colorado, managing the schedules of her 3 children while working part-time as a physical therapist. Her biggest concerns involved getting Emma to soccer practice on time, making sure Michael finished his science project, and convincing little Katie that vegetables were not actually poisonous. The closest thing to combat in her daily routine was negotiating bedtime with a stubborn 6-year-old. The change began on a Tuesday that started like any other. Sarah was running late for Emma's game against the Westfield Warriors, having spent 20 minutes searching for Katie's missing soccer sock, when she received a call that would alter the trajectory of her unremarkable existence. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Marcus Webb, a xenobiologist from the Kepler research station who spoke with the urgent precision of someone delivering news that could not wait. Webb explained that he had been monitoring unusual energy signatures emanating from Earth's population centers, signatures that matched theoretical models for something called quantum resonance fields. Sarah listened with growing confusion as he described how these fields appeared to be concentrated around individuals engaged in what he termed protective maternal activities. The scientific jargon meant nothing to her until Webb mentioned that the strongest readings were coming from soccer fields, school parking lots, and grocery stores during peak family shopping hours. Sarah had been selected, Webb continued, because satellite monitoring had identified her as the source of one of the most powerful quantum signatures ever recorded. The readings spiked whenever she was defending her children's interests. Whether arguing with referees about questionable calls or confronting teachers about unfair homework policies. According to Webb's instruments, Chen was unknowingly generating energy patterns that resembled the quantum signatures of warriors from the most militaristic species in known space. The conversation would have ended there, with Sarah politely declining whatever strange proposition Webb was building toward, except for what happened next. As she stood in the parking lot of Jefferson Elementary, phone pressed to her ear, 3 vehicles pulled up around her car. The occupants were not human, though they wore clothing designed to help them blend in with Earth's population. Their attempts at disguise were reasonably effective from a distance, but up close, Sarah could see the telltale signs that these beings were definitely not from anywhere near Colorado. The leader of the group introduced himself as Ambassador Krell of the Regellian Trade Consortium. His human disguise consisted of an expensive suit that almost concealed the fact that he had too many joints in his arms and fingers, that ended in what were clearly retractable claws. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonic undertones that made Sarah's teeth ache, and his smile revealed dental work that belonged in a horror movie rather than a suburban school parking lot. Krell explained that the Galactic Combat League was facing what he diplomatically termed a crisis of audience engagement. The traditional champions had become too predictable. their fighting styles too familiar to viewers who had been watching the same species dominate the arena for decades. Ratings were declining across 17-star systems, and the league desperately needed fresh talent to revive interest in their premier entertainment product. The problem, Krell continued, was that most species either lacked the physical capabilities necessary for arena combat or possessed such overwhelming advantages that matches became boring exhibitions of superior technology or natural weapons. What the league needed was a competitor who could bring something entirely new to the arena, someone whose fighting style would be completely unpredictable to both opponents and audiences. Sarah tried to interrupt this increasingly surreal conversation, but Krell pressed on with the enthusiasm of a salesman who had finally found his perfect customer. He described how human mothers, specifically those engaged in protecting their offspring, generated quantum field patterns that resembled the most advanced combat techniques known to galactic science. These patterns suggested capabilities that could revolutionize competitive fighting, assuming they could be properly harnessed and directed. The ambassador's proposal was straightforward in its absurdity. Sarah would travel to the league's central arena, compete in a series of matches against increasingly challenging opponents, and in return receive compensation that would ensure her family's financial security for several generations. The league would handle all travel arrangements, provide the necessary equipment and training, and guarantee her safe return to Earth regardless of her performance in the arena. Sarah's first instinct was to laugh, then to call the police, then to wonder if someone was playing an elaborate practical joke. The situation seemed too ridiculous to be real, like something out of a bad science fiction movie. But as she looked at the three vehicles surrounding her car and the definitely not human beings standing next to them, she realized that laughing might not be the most appropriate response. Before she could voice any of the dozens of objections forming in her mind, Krell activated a small device that projected a holographic display into the air above his hand. The display showed footage from recent Galactic Combat League matches, and Sarah watched in fascination as beings of impossible size and strength battled each other with weapons that belonged in fantasy novels. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering that dwarfed any earthly stadium, and the crowds watching these contests numbered in the hundreds of thousands. What captured Sarah's attention, however, was not the spectacle of the matches themselves, but the behavior of the current champions. Despite their obvious physical advantages and advanced weapons, they fought with a methodical predictability that reminded her of the recreational soccer leagues she had observed for years. They were skilled and powerful, but they lacked the creative desperation that characterized truly competitive combat. Krell seemed to sense her growing interest, and sweetened his offer with details that made the proposition increasingly difficult to dismiss. The league would provide Emma with the finest athletic training available in the galaxy, potentially setting her up for a career in interstellar sports. Michael would have access to educational resources that could accelerate his scientific studies by decades. Katie would receive genetic therapies that could enhance her natural abilities in ways that current human medicine could not imagine. More importantly, Sarah's participation would establish Earth as a recognized member of the galactic community, opening up possibilities for trade, technological exchange, and cultural development that could benefit all of humanity. She would not just be fighting for prize money or personal glory, but for her species' future among the stars. The offer was overwhelming in its implications, but Sarah's practical nature focused on more immediate concerns. Who would drive carpool while she was competing in alien gladiator matches? What would she tell the kids about where she was going? How could she possibly prepare for combat against species she had never heard of, using abilities she did not understand? Krell anticipated these concerns and produced a second device that projected what appeared to be a detailed schedule. The league's season operated on compressed timeframes that took advantage of faster-than-light travel and relativistic time dilation effects. Sarah could complete an entire tournament circuit in what would amount to only a few days of Earth time, returning home with minimal disruption to her family's routine. The training period would be similarly compressed, utilizing advanced learning technologies that could download combat techniques directly into her muscle memory and unconscious reflexes. She would not need to spend months or years preparing for competition, but could instead master the necessary skills in a matter of hours using methods that human science was still centuries away from developing. As Sarah listened to these explanations, she became aware that other parents in the school parking lot were beginning to stare. The conversation was attracting attention, and she realized that standing in public while discussing interstellar combat leagues with poorly disguised aliens was probably not the best way to maintain a low profile in suburban Colorado. Krell noticed her discomfort and suggested they continue their discussion in a more private setting. He gestured toward one of the vehicles, which Sarah now realized was larger on the inside than its exterior dimensions should have allowed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The invitation to step inside what was clearly some form of advanced alien technology triggered every maternal instinct she possessed about not getting into vehicles with strangers. But as she looked around the parking lot at the other parents picking up their children, Sarah realized that this might be the most important decision she would ever make, not just for herself, but for her family, and possibly for all of humanity. The opportunity being offered was unprecedented, but so were the risks involved in accepting it. Ambassador Krell seemed to understand her hesitation and made one final argument that cut through all of Sarah's practical concerns. He explained that the League had been monitoring Earth for several months, evaluating potential candidates for recruitment. The quantum signatures they had detected were not random occurrences, but indicators of latent abilities that existed in only a tiny fraction of the human population. Sarah was not just being offered a chance to compete in galactic sports, she was being invited to discover capabilities that she had possessed all along without realizing it. The protective instincts that drove her to argue with referees and challenge authority figures when her children's welfare was at stake were manifestations of quantum field manipulation that most species required advanced technology to achieve. The choice, Krell concluded, was not really about whether to become a gladiator or remain a suburban mother. It was about whether to explore the full extent of her own potential or continue living unaware of abilities that could reshape her understanding of what it meant to be human. Sarah thought about Emma's soccer games, where she had watched her daughter struggle against opponents who seemed naturally gifted with speed and coordination that no amount of practice could match. She thought about Michael's science fair projects, where his carefully researched presentations competed against entries that clearly benefited from resources and guidance far beyond what most families could provide. She thought about Katie's innocent questions about why some kids seemed to get all the advantages, while others had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Maybe this was her chance to level the playing field, not just for her own children, but for all the families who felt like they were fighting uphill battles against systems designed to favor those who already had advantages. Maybe the universe had presented her with an opportunity to prove that determination and protective instinct could triumph over natural gifts and superior resources. Sarah looked at her phone and saw 3 missed calls from Emma's coach, probably wondering where she was for the pre-game warm-up. She thought about all the times she had rearranged her schedule, sacrificed her own plans, and fought through exhaustion to make sure her kids had what they needed to succeed. She thought about the fierce joy she felt when defending them against unfairness, and the surge of energy that seemed to come from nowhere when their well-being was threatened. Perhaps that energy had been coming from somewhere after all. Sarah Chen took a deep breath, looked directly at Ambassador Krell, and said the words that would change everything. She told him she would need to make arrangements for the children, clear her schedule at work, and find someone to handle carpool duties for the next week. But if the League was serious about their offer, and if they could guarantee her family's safety during her absence, then she was willing to explore exactly what these quantum signatures were capable of achieving. Krell's disguised features arranged themselves into what was probably meant to be a reassuring smile, though the effect was somewhat undermined by the predatory sharpness of his dental work. He assured Sarah that her family would be monitored and protected by the finest security systems in known space, and that her return to Earth was guaranteed regardless of her performance in the arena. What he did not mention, and what Sarah would not discover until much later, was that news of her recruitment had already spread throughout the galactic combat community. Across 17 star systems, former champions were emerging from retirement to request special exhibition matches. Species that had never shown interest in arena combat were suddenly volunteering their finest warriors for the chance to face the human competitor. The betting markets had gone completely insane, with odds fluctuating wildly as analysts tried to predict how a suburban mother from Earth would perform against opponents who had been bred for combat across multiple generations. Some species were offering tribute payments just for the privilege of witnessing what they expected to be either the most surprising upset or the most entertainingly one-sided massacre in league history. Most concerning of all, several former champions had privately contacted league officials requesting that their matches against the human be scheduled as grudge matches with reduced safety protocols. These warriors had built their reputations on defeating seemingly impossible opponents, and they saw Sarah Chen as an opportunity to cement their legacies by conquering what appeared to be the ultimate underdog. But Sarah knew none of this. As she watched the alien vehicles disappear into the late afternoon traffic, leaving her standing alone in the school parking lot with a business card made of some material that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. The card contained contact information written in symbols that hurt her eyes to look at directly, along with a phone number that worked on any communications device in the galaxy. She arrived at Emma's soccer game 23 minutes late, just in time to watch her daughter score the winning goal against opponents who had clearly underestimated the determination of a girl whose mother had just agreed to fight aliens for the honor of Earth. As Sarah cheered from the sidelines, she felt that familiar surge of protective energy and wondered exactly what she had gotten herself into. The quantum signature readings, if Dr. Webb's instruments were accurate, had just spiked to levels that would be visible from 3-star systems away. Somewhere in the Galactic Combat League's headquarters, alarms were probably going off as monitoring systems registered energy patterns that suggested Earth's newest recruit was going to be far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Sarah Chen drove home that evening thinking about dinner preparations and homework supervision, while across the galaxy the greatest warriors in known space began training for matches they were no longer certain they could win. The suburban mother had just entered a universe where her fiercest protective instincts would be tested against opponents who had never encountered anything like human maternal determination. The arena awaited, and with it, a confrontation that would prove whether love for one's children could triumph over the most sophisticated combat techniques the galaxy had to offer. Sarah had 3 days to arrange childcare and pack for a trip that would either establish her as the most unlikely champion in sports history or provide a cautionary tale about the dangers of accepting mysterious offers from well-dressed aliens in school parking lots. Either way, carpool schedules were about to become the least of her worries. Dr. Marcus Webb had been studying xenobiology for 15 years, but nothing in his academic training had prepared him for the data streaming across his monitors at Kepler Research Station. The quantum resonance readings from Sarah Chen's preliminary training sessions were rewriting everything scientists thought they knew about human physiological limitations. Webb sat in his cramped laboratory, surrounded by equipment that hummed with the constant analysis of impossible energy signatures, trying to understand how a woman who had never thrown a punch in anger was generating combat patterns that resembled the most advanced martial techniques in galactic history. The training facility that Ambassador Krell had arranged was located on Titan Station, a massive orbital platform that served as the primary preparation center for Galactic Combat League competitors. Sarah had been there for 18 hours, undergoing what the League called basic orientation procedures, and the results were causing panic among the facility's senior staff. Combat instructors who had trained champions from dozens of species were requesting emergency consultations with xenopsychologists, unable to explain how their newest recruit was mastering techniques that typically required months of specialized conditioning. Sarah herself remained blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding her training. From her perspective, the orientation process felt remarkably similar to the fitness classes she had attended at the community center back home. The alien equipment was more sophisticated, and the gravity settings could be adjusted to simulate conditions on various worlds, but the basic principle of learning to move efficiently while under stress felt comfortably familiar. What Sarah did not realize was that her definition of basic movement was causing her instructors to question fundamental assumptions about human capability. When asked to demonstrate defensive positioning, she automatically adopted stances that perfectly countered attack patterns from species she had never encountered. Her responses to simulated combat scenarios showed tactical awareness that suggested years of battlefield experience, despite her complete lack of formal military training. Commander Vex Thorne, the station's head trainer, had developed warriors for 37 different species over his career. His four-armed physique and naturally armored skin made him ideally suited for demonstrating combat techniques to beings from high-gravity worlds. But as he watched Sarah move through training exercises, Thorne found himself taking notes on human maternal behavior patterns and wondering if his own species had been missing crucial elements in their approach to warrior development. The breakthrough moment came during what should have been a routine stress evaluation. Sarah was placed in a simulation chamber designed to test her reactions to various threat scenarios. The program began with basic challenges like navigating unstable terrain and avoiding environmental hazards, gradually escalating to situations that required defensive responses against hostile opponents. Sarah performed adequately during the initial phases, showing the kind of cautious competence that instructors expected from civilian recruits. But when the simulation shifted to scenarios involving threats to dependence, something fundamental changed in her approach to the challenges. The monitoring equipment registered energy spikes that forced technicians to recalibrate their instruments 3 times in rapid succession. In the simulation, Sarah faced a scenario where hostile forces were threatening a group of non-combatants who bore a deliberate resemblance to human children. The test was designed to evaluate emotional control under extreme stress, measuring how recruits maintained tactical effectiveness when confronting situations that triggered protective instincts. Sarah's response bypassed every category that the evaluation system was designed to measure. Instead of following standard defensive protocols, she created what observers could only describe as a localized reality distortion that neutralized the simulated threats while simultaneously establishing protective barriers around the endangered civilians. The energy requirements for such manipulation should have been beyond the capabilities of any single organism, yet Sarah accomplished it while maintaining the calm focus she typically brought to organizing carpools. Commander Thorne immediately halted the simulation and requested an emergency conference with Dr. Webb and the station's senior xenobiologists. The recording of Sarah's performance was transmitted to research facilities across the galaxy, where specialists in quantum mechanics and biological warfare struggled to explain what they were witnessing. Dr. Webb arrived at Titan Station within hours, bringing with him equipment specifically designed to analyze the quantum field phenomena that had first identified Sarah as a potential recruit. His preliminary scans confirmed what the training monitors had detected, but the full scope of the readings challenged everything he thought he understood about the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. Sarah was not simply generating energy patterns that resembled advanced combat techniques. She was unconsciously manipulating fundamental forces in ways that allowed her to alter local space-time conditions, redirect kinetic energy, and create protective fields that operated according to principles that human science had not yet discovered. More troubling was the fact that these abilities seemed to be triggered specifically by scenarios involving the protection of others. When Sarah faced personal threats during training exercises, her performance remained within normal human parameters. But when the safety of dependence was involved, her capabilities expanded to levels that registered as potentially world-ending on the station's threat assessment scales. Webb's investigation revealed that similar phenomena had been documented throughout human history, though always dismissed as folklore or misinterpreted as religious miracles. Stories of mothers lifting vehicles to save trapped children, of ordinary people displaying impossible strength when defending their families, and of protective figures accomplishing feats that defied known physical laws appeared in cultures across Earth. The quantum signature analysis suggested that these were not isolated incidents but manifestations of a previously unrecognized aspect of human evolution. Sarah's abilities were not unique, but rather representative of latent capabilities that emerged under specific emotional and situational triggers. The implications were staggering for both human understanding of their own species and galactic perceptions of Earth's strategic significance. While Webb worked to understand the scientific basis for Sarah's abilities, other investigations were uncovering equally disturbing information about the true nature of her recruitment. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Federation Intelligence Service had been monitoring alien activities on Earth for 3 years, and Ambassador Krell's recruitment mission had triggered security protocols that demanded immediate investigation. Rodriguez's analysis of the Galactic Combat League's recent activities revealed patterns that suggested Sarah's recruitment was part of a larger strategic initiative rather than a simple search for entertainment value. The League had been quietly identifying and evaluating potential human recruits for months, building detailed profiles of individuals who demonstrated the quantum signature patterns that had first attracted their attention. More concerning was the discovery that several other spacefaring civilizations had been conducting similar surveys of Earth's population, apparently searching for humans who displayed what internal documents referred to as protective resonance capabilities. The terminology suggested that alien intelligence services had identified these abilities as militarily significant rather than merely interesting biological curiosities. Rodriguez's investigation uncovered communication intercepts indicating that news of Sarah's recruitment had spread far beyond the entertainment industry. Military strategists from species that had never shown interest in human affairs were suddenly requesting detailed briefings on Earth's defensive capabilities and population distribution patterns. The picture that emerged from these intelligence reports was deeply troubling. Earth had apparently been under observation by multiple alien civilizations for far longer than human governments realized, and Sarah's participation in the Combat League was being viewed as a test of human military potential rather than an athletic exhibition. Rodriguez shared her findings with General Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer of Earth's newly established Space Defense Initiative. Hayes had been arguing for increased military preparedness since first contact protocols were established, warning that humanity's technological disadvantages made them vulnerable to exploitation by more advanced civilizations. The intelligence reports confirmed Hayes's worst fears about alien intentions toward Earth. The Combat League appeared to be serving as a recruitment and evaluation system for identifying species with undiscovered military capabilities. Previous champions who had performed exceptionally well in arena combat had subsequently seen their home worlds subjected to protective trade agreements that amounted to economic colonization. Hayes immediately classified Sarah's participation in the League as a matter of planetary security and activated emergency protocols designed to protect Earth from potential exploitation. But the general quickly discovered that the agreements Krell had negotiated with Sarah contained clauses that made intervention extremely difficult without triggering interstellar incident protocols. The legal framework governing galactic sports competition included provisions that prohibited interference with voluntary participants, and Sarah's recruitment had been carefully structured to comply with all relevant regulations. Any attempt to extract her from the League without her consent would be treated as an act of aggression against multiple alien civilizations, potentially triggering conflicts that humanity was not equipped to survive. Hayes found herself in the impossible position of watching a civilian citizen potentially expose critical military secrets while being legally powerless to intervene. The only option available was to provide Sarah with support and intelligence that might help her understand the true significance of her situation without violating the agreements that protected Earth from immediate retaliation. Meanwhile, Sarah remained focused on the practical challenges of preparing for competition against opponents who possessed natural advantages that seemed insurmountable. The training facility's library contained detailed profiles of previous League champions, and Sarah spent her free time studying the fighting styles and capabilities of beings who had dominated arena combat for years. Zephyr the Destroyer's record was particularly intimidating. The four-armed warrior from Kepler 442b had won 17 consecutive matches against opponents from species known for their military prowess. His natural weapons and armored skin provided advantages that no amount of human determination seemed capable of overcoming. But as Sarah reviewed footage of Zephyr's recent matches, she began to notice patterns in his fighting style that reminded her of the recreational league soccer players she had watched for years. Despite his obvious physical advantages, Zephyr fought with a methodical predictability that suggested he had never faced opponents who required creative tactical approaches. The realization that galactic champions might be vulnerable to unconventional strategies gave Sarah her first genuine hope of competitive success. Her background in managing children's sports teams had taught her that natural talent could often be overcome by superior preparation and willingness to exploit overlooked opportunities. Sarah began developing training routines that emphasized unpredictability over raw power, focusing on techniques that would confuse opponents who expected human competitors to rely on primitive aggression rather than sophisticated tactical thinking. She practiced movements that appeared defensive but could instantly transition to offensive capabilities, using the same principles that had helped her navigate crowded grocery stores while managing 3 children and a shopping cart. Dr. Webb's continued analysis of Sarah's quantum field phenomena provided scientific support for her intuitive approach to combat preparation. The energy patterns she generated were most effective when triggered by protective scenarios that activated her maternal instincts, suggesting that her greatest advantages would emerge when she perceived her opponents as threats to something she valued. Webb worked with Sarah to develop mental conditioning techniques that would allow her to channel protective energy even when fighting for abstract goals like planetary security or species recognition. The training involved visualization exercises where Sarah imagined her opponents threatening not just herself but everything she cared about on Earth. The results were remarkable and terrifying in equal measure. When Sarah fully activated her protective instincts during training scenarios, the quantum field effects became visible to the naked eye as reality distortions that made the air around her shimmer like heat waves. Equipment in her vicinity began operating beyond normal parameters, and the station's structural integrity monitors registered stress patterns that suggested local spacetime was becoming unstable. Commander Thorne recommended that Sarah's final training exercises be conducted in specially shielded chambers designed to contain energy releases that could potentially damage the station's critical systems. The precautions were unprecedented for individual competitor preparation, normally reserved for testing experimental weapons systems or containing hazardous alien technologies. As Sarah's training period neared completion, intelligence reports from Captain Rodriguez revealed that her upcoming matches had attracted attention from observers who represented interests far beyond entertainment value. Military attachés from dozens of civilizations had requested permission to attend the competitions, ostensibly as cultural exchanges but clearly intended as intelligence-gathering operations. The betting markets had evolved beyond simple wagering on match outcomes to complex financial instruments that appeared to be hedging against various scenarios involving Earth's future relationship with galactic civilization. Some of the largest bets were being placed not on Sarah's victory or defeat, but on specific performance metrics that would indicate the extent of human defensive capabilities. General Hayes authorized the deployment of covert observation teams to monitor alien activities during the competition, but the legal constraints surrounding the League made direct intervention impossible. Earth's government could only watch as their most sensitive military secrets were potentially exposed through the performance of a suburban mother who remained unaware of the true stakes involved in her athletic career. Dr. Webb completed his analysis with conclusions that revolutionized human understanding of their own species, while raising questions that threatened the stability of interstellar relations. Sarah's abilities were not aberrations but indicators of evolutionary capabilities that existed throughout the human population in dormant form. The quantum field effects could potentially be activated in any human under appropriate circumstances, making Earth's entire population a strategic resource of unprecedented value. The revelation that humans possessed undiscovered defensive capabilities was simultaneously humanity's greatest hope for survival among the stars, and their greatest vulnerability to exploitation by civilizations that might seek to control such abilities. Sarah's performance in the arena would determine not just her own fate, but the future relationship between Earth and the galactic community. As her training concluded and departure for the competition arena approached, Sarah remained focused on the practical goal of performing well enough to honor the trust that had been placed in her. She had no idea that her success or failure would influence decisions being made in alien capitals across the galaxy, or that military strategists were already developing contingency plans based on preliminary assessments of human combat potential. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test more than Sarah's fighting abilities. The arena would become a crucible where humanity's hidden nature was revealed to a galaxy that was still deciding whether Earth's inhabitants were potential allies, valuable resources, or existential threats that required immediate containment. Sarah Chen packed her gym bag and kissed her children goodbye, thinking she was leaving for an athletic competition that would last a few days. In reality, she was embarking on a journey that would determine whether humanity would be welcomed into galactic civilization or subjected to controls designed to prevent them from realizing their true potential. The investigation phase was complete, and the revelation of humanity's hidden capabilities had attracted the attention of forces that would shape Earth's destiny among the stars. The arena awaited, and with it, answers to questions that would change everything for both Sarah and her species. The crystalline arena stretched across the 3 moons of Zirion Prime, its transparent walls humming with energy fields designed to contain forces that could shatter planets. Sarah Chen stood in the preparation chamber, adjusting the straps on her regulation combat suit while checking her phone one last time for messages from Emma's soccer coach. The irony of worrying about a missed practice while preparing to fight the galaxy's most dangerous warrior was not lost on her, but maternal priorities remained constant regardless of interstellar circumstances. Across the arena complex, Zephyr the Destroyer paced in his own preparation area, his 4 massive arms flexing nervously as he reviewed footage of Sarah's training sessions. For the first time in his 7-year championship reign, The Kepler warrior was experiencing something his species had no word for, though humans would have recognized it immediately as stage fright. His handlers had assured him that defeating a small human female would be a routine exhibition match, but the quantum field readings from her preparation sessions suggested otherwise. The arena's central combat zone featured adaptive terrain that could shift between different planetary environments during the match, providing variety for the viewing audience while testing competitors' ability to adjust tactics in real time. Today's configuration began with the rocky highlands of Vega 7, complete with low gravity and unpredictable wind patterns that had challenged countless warriors over the years. Sarah emerged from the preparation tunnel to thunderous applause from 60,000 spectators representing 47 different species. The diversity of the crowd was overwhelming, from crystalline beings that communicated through color changes to gaseous entities that existed as controlled energy patterns within mechanical containment suits. Every known form of sapient life had gathered to witness what many expected to be either the greatest upset or most entertaining massacre in league history. The betting pools had reached unprecedented levels, with some wagers extending beyond simple match outcomes to include provisions for planetary trade agreements and territorial claims based on the demonstration of human military potential. Sarah remained unaware of these broader implications, focusing instead on the breathing techniques her trainer had taught her and trying not to think about how Zephyr's claws could probably cut through titanium. The match began with traditional combat protocols, allowing both competitors to establish their preferred fighting positions while the arena's sensors calibrated threat assessment parameters. Zephyr immediately demonstrated the aggressive style that had made him famous, using his superior reach and natural weapons to control territory while testing his opponent's defensive capabilities. Sarah's response surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of attempting to match Zephyr's aggressive approach, she adopted the patient positioning strategy she had developed while managing chaotic situations at children's birthday parties. She remained mobile but defensive, studying her opponent's movement patterns while conserving energy for moments when decisive action would be most effective. The first phase of the match established a rhythm that frustrated Zephyr while intriguing the viewing audience. The massive warrior's attacks were technically perfect but failed to connect with significant impact, as Sarah demonstrated an uncanny ability to anticipate his strikes and position herself just outside their effective range. Her movement style appeared almost casual, like a busy mother navigating through crowded spaces while carrying groceries and managing children. Zephyr's handlers signaled for him to increase aggression levels, triggering combat instincts that had been honed across multiple generations of selective breeding for warfare. His attacks became faster and more complex, utilizing all four arms and coordinated patterns that had overwhelmed previous opponents through sheer technical superiority. But as Zephyr escalated his offensive approach, something fundamental shifted in Sarah's response to the threat. The arena's quantum field monitors registered energy spikes that forced observers to recalibrate their equipment as reality began to bend around the human competitor. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for decades to come. Sarah's protective instincts fully activated as she processed the match not as a sporting competition, but as a threat to everything she valued. In her mind, Zephyr became every bully who had ever threatened her children, every authority figure who had dismissed her concerns, and every obstacle that had stood between her family and their well-being. The quantum fields that Dr. Webb had detected in training scenarios erupted into visible manifestations that transformed the arena into something beyond normal physical laws. The first sign of change was spatial distortion around Sarah's position, creating effects that made her appear to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Zephyr's perfectly coordinated attacks began striking empty air as his target seemed to phase between different dimensional planes. The warrior's confusion was visible even through his natural armor, as centuries of combat training proved inadequate for addressing an opponent who operated according to unknown principles. Sarah's counterattack began with movements that looked like housework rather than martial arts. She gathered energy from the arena's environment using gestures that resembled organizing clutter, redirecting Zephyr's kinetic force, with techniques that appeared to involve folding space like laundry. The massive warrior found himself stumbling through attacks that should have been physically impossible to interrupt or redirect. The crowd's reaction evolved from excited anticipation to stunned silence as they witnessed combat techniques that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. Sarah was not simply fighting Zephyr, she was rewriting the physical laws that governed their interaction, creating localized conditions where her protective instincts overrode conventional limitations on human capability. Zephyr attempted to adapt by utilizing his species' most advanced combat techniques, transforming his natural weapons into energy projectors that could theoretically overcome any physical defense. But Sarah's response demonstrated capabilities that transcended traditional categories of offensive and defensive action. She absorbed his energy attacks while simultaneously redirecting their force back toward him, creating feedback loops that left the champion struggling to maintain basic coordination. The turning point came when Zephyr, desperate to salvage his reputation through decisive action, activated combat modifications that increased his physical capabilities beyond safe operational parameters. The enhancement process would have killed most organic beings but merely elevated Zephyr to threat levels that triggered Sarah's deepest protective responses. What followed was a demonstration of human potential that sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization. Sarah's quantum field effects expanded beyond personal combat applications to encompass strategic defensive capabilities that could theoretically protect entire populations. She created protective barriers that operated independently of known energy sources, while maintaining offensive pressure that forced Zephyr into increasingly desperate defensive positions. The match concluded when Sarah, moving with the calm efficiency she brought to solving household crises, simply neutralized Zephyr's enhanced combat capabilities without causing permanent harm to the warrior himself. She approached the problem of defeating a superior opponent with the same methodical competence she applied to managing family emergencies, treating Zephyr's advantages as obstacles to be circumvented rather than forces to be directly opposed. Zephyr the Destroyer, undefeated champion of the Galactic Combat League, found himself gently but firmly immobilized by fields of energy that felt like being wrapped in invisible blankets by a caring but implacable mother. His weapons were neutralized, his movements restricted, and his dignity intact, but his championship career definitively concluded. The arena fell silent as spectators from across the galaxy processed what they had witnessed. Sarah Chen, suburban mother and part-time physical therapist, had not just defeated the league's greatest champion, she had demonstrated capabilities that redefined galactic understanding of human potential and Earth's strategic significance among the stars. The immediate aftermath involved emergency conferences among species representatives who realized that their assumptions about humanity's place in galactic civilization required fundamental revision. The protective capabilities Sarah had demonstrated suggested that Earth's population possessed defensive potential that could influence the balance of power among star-faring civilizations. Ambassador Krell, who had recruited Sarah for what he believed would be entertaining exhibition matches, found himself managing a diplomatic crisis as military attachés from dozens of species demanded detailed briefings on human capabilities and Earth's intentions regarding interstellar relations. The Combat League had inadvertently revealed information that governments across the galaxy considered vital to their national security. Sarah, meanwhile, checked her phone for messages from her children's schools and asked arena staff about transportation arrangements for her return trip to Earth. From her perspective, she had completed the job she had been hired to do and needed to get home in time for Katie's dance recital and Michael's science fair presentation. The broader implications of her victory would reshape humanity's relationship with galactic civilization, establishing Earth as a species whose protective capabilities demanded respect rather than exploitation. The suburban soccer mom had proven that determination, protective instinct, and maternal love could triumph over the most sophisticated combat techniques the galaxy had to offer. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah had demonstrated that extraordinary abilities existed within ordinary people when circumstances required them to protect what they valued most. The universe had gained a new understanding of human potential, while Sarah had gained confidence that no challenge was insurmountable when family was worth fighting for. The arena began preparations for cleanup and equipment repairs, while across the galaxy, military strategists and diplomatic corps scrambled to develop new policies for dealing with a species whose capabilities had just exceeded every previous assessment. Earth would never again be considered a primitive backwater suitable for exploitation or dismissal. Sarah Chen headed home to suburban Colorado, where carpools and soccer practices awaited her attention, leaving behind a galaxy that would never underestimate the protective power of human mothers again. 6 months after Sarah Chen returned to her suburban life in New Denver, the ripple effects of her victory continued reshaping galactic civilization in ways that no one had anticipated. The Galactic Combat League had been disbanded following emergency sessions of the Interstellar Council, not because of controversy over the match results, but because 17 different species had submitted formal requests to recruit their own protective response specialists for what were clearly military rather than entertainment purposes. Chen scored her third goal of the season against the North Side Eagles, unaware that her mother's name was being discussed in war councils across 12-star systems. Sarah cheered from the sidelines with the same enthusiasm she had always brought to her daughter's games, though she occasionally noticed unusual aircraft passing overhead that didn't quite match conventional flight patterns. The quantum field research initiated by Dr. Webb had evolved into humanity's most classified scientific program, overseen by a joint task force representing every major Earth government. Webb himself had been promoted to director of the newly established Institute for Human Potential Studies, where teams of researchers worked around the clock to understand the implications of abilities that seem to exist throughout the human population in dormant form. Initial surveys suggested that approximately 12% of Earth's population possessed the genetic markers associated with quantum field manipulation, though the abilities remained inactive in most individuals unless triggered by specific emotional and situational catalysts. The discovery had profound implications for everything from military planning to social services, as governments grappled with policies for managing citizens who might unknowingly possess reality-altering capabilities. Sarah remained the most extensively studied case, though she had politely declined requests for additional testing that would require extended absences from her family responsibilities. The Institute's remote monitoring systems tracked the quantum signatures generated by her daily activities, revealing that her abilities manifested most strongly during routine maternal tasks rather than crisis situations. The data suggested that Sarah's quantum field effects were constantly active at low levels, enhancing her efficiency at managing complex schedules and multiple simultaneous responsibilities. Her ability to navigate crowded grocery stores while supervising 3 children and maintaining awareness of potential hazards appeared to involve unconscious manipulation of probability fields that improved outcomes for her family's well-being. General Hayes had established the Strategic Human Defense Initiative following recommendations from xenobiology experts who warned that Earth's newfound prominence in galactic affairs would inevitably attract attention from species with aggressive expansion policies. The general's worst fears were confirmed when intelligence intercepts revealed that at least 6 different civilizations were developing contingency plans for managing the human defensive anomaly through various forms of preemptive intervention. The most immediate concern involved the hegemony of Keith, a militaristic alliance that had built their empire through conquering species whose defensive capabilities posed potential threats to Keith expansion goals. Historical analysis of hegemony activities revealed a consistent pattern of preemptive strikes against civilizations that demonstrated military innovations or unusual strategic advantages. Ambassador Krell, whose recruitment of Sarah had triggered this cascade of unintended consequences, found himself serving as Earth's primary liaison with galactic diplomatic institutions while dealing with formal censure from his own government for unauthorized revelation of classified human capabilities. His status as the alien most familiar with human culture made him invaluable for managing interspecies relations, despite his superior's displeasure with his recruitment methods. Krell's reports to the Rigelian Trade Consortium included recommendations for establishing formal diplomatic relations with Earth based on mutual respect, rather than the economic exploitation models typically applied to newly contacted species. His analysis emphasized that humanity's protective capabilities made traditional colonization approaches both impractical and extremely dangerous for any civilization that attempted them. The economic implications of human quantum field abilities were revolutionizing interstellar commerce, as researchers discovered applications for probability manipulation in everything from agricultural optimization to manufacturing efficiency. Earth's agricultural exports had increased by 300% following implementation of quantum-enhanced farming techniques developed by mothers whose protective instincts extended to ensuring food security for their communities. Sarah's sister-in-law Jennifer had inadvertently become the most successful small business owner in Colorado after her protective concerns about neighborhood safety triggered quantum field effects that made her home security consulting company capable of designing protection systems that operated according to principles that conventional technology could not replicate. The global economy was adapting to the reality that ordinary citizens engaged in protective activities might spontaneously develop capabilities that could transform entire industries. Governments were establishing regulatory frameworks for managing quantum field applications, while ensuring that citizens remained unaware of their potential abilities unless activation occurred naturally. Sarah's children remained oblivious to their mother's galactic significance, though Emma had noticed that opposing soccer teams seemed unusually prone to coordination problems when playing against her team. Michael's science fair projects had begun incorporating theoretical concepts that his teachers found remarkably sophisticated for his age level. Katie's art classes were producing drawings that seemed to move slightly when viewed from different angles. Dr. Webb's research suggested that children of quantum field active parents showed accelerated development in areas related to their parents' protective focus. The phenomenon appeared to be unconscious enhancement of offspring capabilities through parental quantum field effects, raising questions about the long-term evolutionary implications of widespread ability activation. The Interstellar Council had established the Human Integration Committee to develop policies for managing Earth's transition from isolated civilization to strategic galactic participant. The committee's proceedings were complicated by disagreements among species representatives about whether humanity represented an opportunity for enhanced galactic security or a threat requiring careful containment. Sarah received formal invitations to address the committee as Earth's most documented quantum field specialist, but she politely declined due to scheduling conflicts with her children's extracurricular activities. Her refusal to prioritize galactic politics over family responsibilities was interpreted by some species as evidence of human diplomatic sophistication, while others viewed it as confirmation that humans could not be trusted with responsibilities proportional to their capabilities. The betting markets that had initially focused on Sarah's combat performance had evolved into complex financial instruments predicting various scenarios for human integration into galactic civilization. The largest pools involved wagering on timeframes for widespread human ability activation and the potential impact on existing power structures among star-faring species. Zephyr the Destroyer had retired from professional combat following his defeat, but found unexpected success as a commentator specializing in analysis of unconventional fighting techniques. His first-hand experience with human protective capabilities made him the galaxy's leading expert on defensive strategies that operated outside traditional military doctrines. The former champion's commentary on subsequent matches provided insights that helped other species understand the fundamental differences between combat techniques designed for conquest versus those developed for protection. His analysis emphasized that Sarah's victory had demonstrated the superiority of defensive motivations over aggressive instincts, when capabilities were otherwise comparable. Captain Rodriguez's intelligence networks had identified 43 separate alien monitoring operations currently observing Earth's population for signs of quantum field activation. The surveillance was conducted by species ranging from academic researchers seeking to understand human abilities to military organizations evaluating Earth as a potential threat or asset. Sarah's daily routine now included discreet security measures designed to protect her family from attention by hostile alien factions while maintaining the appearance of normal suburban life. The protection protocols were largely invisible to civilian observers, but involved coordination between Earth's defense forces and friendly alien governments committed to preventing interference with human development. The most significant long-term change involved humanity's growing awareness that they were no longer alone in the universe. Though public disclosure of alien contact remained limited to gradual cultural preparation rather than dramatic revelations. Science fiction entertainment had become surprisingly influential in conditioning public attitudes toward interstellar relations and the possibility of human abilities that transcended conventional limitations. Sarah Chen continued driving carpool, attending PTA meetings, and managing her family's complex schedule while serving as humanity's unwitting ambassador to a galaxy that was still learning to coexist with a species whose greatest strength emerged from their commitment to protecting those they loved. The universe had discovered that the most powerful force in galactic civilization was not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the determination of ordinary people to ensure the safety and well-being of their families. Earth's mothers had become the galaxy's most respected strategic asset, though most of them remained focused on decidedly terrestrial concerns like homework supervision and soccer practice schedules. The age of human integration into galactic civilization had begun not with conquest or diplomacy, but with the simple truth that love for one's children could overcome any obstacle the universe might present. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.